Before Pryor could announce her, Conrad was at the corner table near the window, alone, with a cup of coffee and a newspaper he was not reading. She could tell from the doorway, the stillness of a man whose eyes are pointed at a page, while his mind is pointed somewhere else entirely. He looked up when she came in. She watched the sequence move through his face. Surprise. Then something more complicated than surprise. Then the controlled settling back into composure that was reflex in him. She sat down across from him without waiting. "Your father wrote to me," she said, 3 days ago, delivered the morning after you came to Ash Hill." The composure shifted, a tightening around his eyes. "He expressed concern for my health," she continued, "and made specific note of the fact that I had recently visited Dr. Greer. You didn't tell him that. You didn't know about it yourself. Which means your father had someone watching my movements, Conrad. Someone who noticed my visit to the doctor and reported it back." 2 breaths of silence. "I did not tell him that," he said. "I know. Which is exactly the point." She held his gaze. "Whatever he is planning, whatever he suspects, the situation has a timeline that is no longer entirely under my control. I will not allow myself to be managed by a man who had someone watching me without my knowledge. You need to decide what you actually want before your father decides it for you." He was quiet for a long moment. "Then, there's something you're not telling me." It landed with the quiet precision of an accurate observation, not a guess. "Yes," she said, "there is." "Are you going to tell me?" "Not today." Her voice was final without being hard. "There are things I need to understand first. Where you stand. Genuinely." She looked at him. "When I see it, I'll know it." She stood to leave. "I wrote to him," Conrad said. She stopped. 3 days ago. The morning after I left Ash Hill. He was looking at the table, not at her, in the way men sometimes deliver the most important things sideways. "Before I knew about his letter to you, I told him I was handling the matter myself, that his lawyer was dismissed, and I didn't require his further involvement." She held that, turned it over twice carefully. "Why?" He was quiet for several strides of silence. "Because sitting in that room with you, I understood for the first time that I had been letting other people define what was happening between us. I had been calling it practicality. Doing the right thing." A pause. "It wasn't any of those." "What was it?" "Cowardice." The word came out plain. No performance around it, just the actual thing, said by a man who had had to work up to saying it. She recognized it for what it was. They rode back toward Ash Hill together. Not because either of them had said so exactly, but because he fell into pace beside her horse, and neither of them made a move toward a different direction. The road was frozen, the trees bare, the sky the flat white of coming snow. They did not speak much. It was a different kind of silence than the morning of his first visit. Not heavy with everything unsaid, but quieter, the kind that doesn't need filling. They were a quarter-mile from Ash Hill when they heard a second carriage on the main road. Heavier wheels, 2 horses, the kind of equipage that announces itself. Conrad heard it the same moment she did. He didn't wait, Conrad said. Roderick Raleigh had come himself. She did not step back from the porch steps. She stood beside Conrad, not behind him, beside him, and watched his father's carriage stop on the frozen drive. Roderick was a tall man, 60s, with the face of someone who had been formidable at 40 and had only grown more so with time. He climbed down, settled his coat, looked at Conrad, looked at Estelle, looked at the way they were standing together on her front steps. He read the situation in 2 seconds. "I know about the child," he said. He had timed it precisely, she could tell. She did not flinch. "Then you know more than I did 3 weeks ago," she said evenly. "And you found it out by having someone watch my movements without my knowledge or consent." She tilted her head just slightly. "I wonder, Mr. Raleigh, whether a Hartford judge would find that detail as interesting as I do." A silence. Something shifted in Roderick's expression. Not visibly, he was too practiced for that, but a recalculation, a reassessment of what he was dealing with. "The dissolution proceedings are finished," Conrad said. "Estelle is carrying my child. Whatever was arranged with the Forsyth family, you will unmake it." Roderick looked at his son for a long moment. Then at Estelle again, with the measuring look of a man revising his understanding of territory he thought he already knew. "Your father was James Duval," he said finally. "He was. He and I argued about county water rights once. He was right. I didn't tell him so at the time." A pause. "I'm telling you now." He descended the step. He turned toward his carriage. He stopped once, his back to them, and said to the air, The child carries the Raleigh name, that is all I require. He got in, the driver turned the horses. The carriage moved back down the frozen lane. When it was out of sight, Conrad let out one slow breath. That is not over, Estelle said. No. He looked at her, but he walked away without a legal threat or a new offer, which means he has recalculated. Not conceded, she said. Recalculated. There is a difference. She looked back at the empty road. He is a man who plays the long game. He has just lost the opening. Conrad went inside to collect the traveling case from where he'd left it. He had been intending, cautiously, to move his things to Ash Hill if Estelle would permit it. The open door that morning had felt like permission of a kind. Provisional. Requiring careful handling. But permission. He came back through the front room 20 minutes later, holding a folded letter. She saw his face and understood immediately that something had happened. He held the letter out to her without speaking. She took it. She read it. It was dated 6 weeks ago, before Conrad had come to Ash Hill, before he had made any decision of his own. It was written in his name, signed with a near-perfect approximate signature. In it, Conrad confirmed his intention to dissolve the marriage to Estelle Duval, and expressed his anticipation of a union with Miss Adela Forsyth at the earliest opportunity. It referenced financial arrangements. A timeline. It was, in every material detail, a binding social commitment made in his name, without his knowledge or consent. He put it in your case, she said. Yes. Conrad's voice was very controlled, so that if I found it, I would assume I had written it myself. Or so that after the dissolution was complete, it would appear the next step had already been arranged. He looked at her steadily. Either way, it was there to move me in the direction he had already decided on. Before I ever came to Ash Hill, I was not making my own decision when I rode here. I was executing a plan he had made months ago, believing it was mine. She set the letter on the table between them, and looked at it for a moment. How long has he been doing this? She asked. The question landed differently than she had intended. She saw it in his face, the way it struck something older than the immediate situation. Since my father died, he said quietly. I was 23. My uncle stepped in. He was useful. He had strong opinions about the estate and about me, and I let him, because I did not know what the right thing was, and because his way of framing everything made it simple. And simple was easier than honest. He looked at his hands. I kept letting him because I had been calling deference to his judgment wisdom, rather than cowardice. And now? She said. Now I am going to Hartford. He said it with the quietness of a fully made decision. I am going to find a lawyer, my own, not his, and I am going to understand exactly what legal exposure exists for both of us. And then I am going to have a conversation with my father that will not be comfortable for either of us. He held her gaze. I need you to know that I am not doing this because of the child. I am doing it because my father wrote my name on a document I did not write, and that is not something I will permit. Regardless of anything else. She looked at him for a long moment. How long will you be gone? A week, perhaps 10 days, a pause. I'll write. Real letters, Estelle, not about fences. Something moved through her, quick and warm and unwelcome in its warmth, because hope was always unwelcome, when you had been carefully managing its absence. See that you do, she said. The first letter arrived 4 days in, 3 pages, telling her about the lawyer he had found. A man named Albright, recommended by a judge entirely outside the Raleigh family's network. It told her that Albright had examined the forged letter and confirmed the signature discrepancy was sufficient grounds for legal action, should Conrad choose to pursue it. It told her the Forsyth family had been formally notified that the commitment represented in the letter had not been authorized and would not be honored. At the bottom, in handwriting different from the careful legal summary above, looser, quicker, the writing of a man writing from somewhere below his usual composure, he had added. I read the forged letter again in Albright's office today and understood for the first time what my father actually thinks of me. Not what he says, what he thinks. He thinks I am a piece on a board that can be moved without consultation. I am 2 days past the first anger and into something quieter that I don't entirely have words for yet. I want you to know that I am all right. Not the way I was performing all right in your front room. Actually all right, the kind that comes from having made a decision that is entirely my own. I will explain better when I return. Estelle read the postscript 4 times. Then she folded the letter and put it in the tin on her father's windowsill beside her own money and went back to the kitchen. Lottie, without turning from the stove, you're humming. I am not. You were, for the last 10 minutes. Estelle did not argue with her. The social trouble, when it came, arrived through a side door. A woman named Mrs. Langford, connected through her husband to Roderick's Hartford network, began saying things at the dry goods counter, at the post office, in the careful social infrastructure of a small Connecticut town. She said the child was not Conrad's. She said Estelle had manufactured the pregnancy after the dissolution papers arrived. She said other things, smaller and sharper, the kind that don't survive examination but travel faster than examination can follow. Maddie brought the news on a Tuesday evening, her voice careful and her face apologetic. Estelle listened to the end. Then she looked at Conrad, who had returned the day before, who was standing in the kitchen doorway, with the expression of a man hearing something and deciding, very quietly, what he intended to do about it. "Millbridge is 3 hours," she said. "I know where Millbridge is," he said. "We go together." He held her gaze. "Together," he said. They rode in the next morning, side by side on the main road, unhurried and visible in the full gray light of a December day, not hiding from anything. They stopped first at Reverend Alcorn's, who had known Estelle since she was 8, and whose word in the county carried 35 years of earned credibility. He listened, asked 2 questions, and said he would speak plainly when asked. Their second stop Estelle decided when she saw Langford himself through the window of his establishment, who had the poor judgment to make eye contact with her, through the glass, and then look away too quickly. "Stop," she said. Conrad pulled up. He looked at the storefront. He looked at her face. "All right." She went in. She crossed to the counter. She stood with her hands folded in front of her and looked at Langford steadily, and she told him the truth plainly, without raising her voice, without cruelty. The way her father had taught her that truth works best, direct and without decoration. She told him where the story had come from and why. She told him that his wife's continued circulation of it was something she trusted he would address. She told him the Raleigh estate's business arrangements with his establishment were something neither side had any interest in disrupting. She held his gaze for one beat past comfort. "I think we understand each other," she said. Langford looked at Conrad, perhaps hoping for some negotiated retreat. "My wife has said everything that needs to be said," Conrad said. They walked out into the December cold. A full block down the main street, Conrad said. "That was necessary," Estelle said. She was slightly out of breath, not from exertion, but from the concentrated force it had taken to be that precisely herself in that room. "You walked in there and told a man the truth about himself," Conrad said. "Without losing your dignity for a single second." He looked at her across the horses. "Say the rest of it when we are home." She looked at him sideways. "Don't make it charming." "I'm not," he said. "I mean it." They rode home. The talk in Millbridge did not stop entirely that week. Talk never stops entirely. It loses confidence in itself, changes shape, becomes less interesting than the counter-story. Reverend Alcorn, asked directly by several parishioners, said what he knew without drama. Maddie said what she knew to 2 of the county's most efficient gossips, and left the rest to arithmetic. Conrad, asked by the county magistrate whether the rumors were true, said no, and the magistrate accepted this without further question, the way the county accepted Conrad Raleigh's word, as settled. The story didn't die. It became less interesting than the truth. That was always the more durable outcome. It was a Tuesday evening in January, 9 days after the Millbridge visit, when Estelle sat in the front room and told Conrad the rest of what she had been keeping. She had not planned the moment. There was no perfect moment for it. She had simply reached the end of being ready. "I need to tell you something," she said. "I need you to hear all of it before you say anything. Not just the beginning, all of it." He set down his book. "All right," she told him, plainly, beginning with Dr. Greer's office in October, and the 8 weeks he had confirmed, and the timeline that matched September, before Conrad had left, before any of this had begun, and then she told him why she had kept it. "Because I knew what you would do," she said. "The moment I told you, I knew you would close that case, and put the document away, and tell me we would work it out, and you would mean it in that moment." She held his gaze. "But 6 months later, or a year, you would look at me and see the woman who told you about the child at the exact moment you were trying to leave. And you would wonder, you would always wonder, whether you stayed because you wanted to stay, or because I made it impossible to do anything else." Conrad pressed one hand over his mouth briefly, then dropped it. "I would rather raise this child alone," she said, "with this house and my father's books and Lottie's company, than raise a child inside a marriage, where every time you look at me, You wonder what your life might have been. He stood. Not in anger. She knew his anger, and this was not it. He stood because he could not hold what he was feeling and stay seated. He crossed to the window the same way she had crossed to the window in November, and he stood with his back to her, and she let him, because she had given him a hard truth, and he was owed the space to hold it. You knew, he said finally, when I sat in this room with the papers, when I told you about allowances and Adela Forsyth, the entire time. Yes. And you said nothing. I said quite a lot, she said. I just didn't say that. Something in his face broke open when he turned back to face her. Not completely, not dramatically, but in the way old timber breaks along a grain that was always its weak point, finally given enough pressure to give. He crossed back to the table. He stood near enough that she had to look up to hold his eyes. You sat here, he said, carrying my child, listening to me explain why it was practical to dissolve our marriage. And you did not use what you knew to stop me. He looked at her steadily. Do you have any idea what that says about you? I know what it says about what I believe a person is owed, she said. A real choice. With full information. Not obligation dressed as love. Elizabeth. He stopped. Something moved through his face. That is the most, Estelle. You were sitting across from me, and you said nothing. Because you would rather be alone than have me wonder. Yes, she said simply. He was quiet for a long time. I need you to hear something, he said. I'm listening. I came here 5 days ago with that document. I sat in this room and explained clerical errors and quarterly allowances and Adela Forsyth, and I had convinced myself it was the right thing, the kind thing. And you sat across from me and did not cry and did not beg and did not use what you knew to stop me. He held her gaze. I have spent 5 days trying to understand why that was the most disturbing thing that has ever happened to me. She tilted her head. Because it meant, he said, that you had already made peace with losing this marriage, that you valued your own dignity more than you valued keeping me. A pause. That is not what a woman does if she was ever trying to trap someone. The word hung between them, trap. The accusation that had never been spoken aloud, but had lived underneath everything, in every line of Roderick's letters, in every word of the solicitor's document. Your father believes otherwise, she said. My father is wrong, Conrad said, flat and final, no qualification around it. My father has spent 40 years believing that every woman who marries into money has a scheme, because that is the only framework he has for understanding why a woman would want anything at all. His voice had an edge now, not at her, but the contained pressure of a man who has understood something about himself he did not enjoy. And I have been letting him frame this situation, frame you. And that is inexcusable, Estelle. I am not going to dress it up as anything less. She looked at him carefully. This child is real, she said. And the fact that I am telling you does not obligate you. I am telling you because you have a right to know, and because your father was closing in on the truth, and I would not allow him to be the one who told you. She kept her voice level and precise. But I am not telling you so that you will stay. I am telling you so that you can make a real choice, with all of the information, for the first time in this entire situation. He looked at her for a long moment. And if I choose to stay, he said, you choose to stay knowing I will never agree to be managed. Yes. Knowing I will say what I actually think, including when you are wrong. Especially then. Knowing, he said, and something crossed his face, quick and involuntary, that I am, as my father has told me on multiple occasions, considerably more difficult than Adela Forsyth would ever be. Something moved through her. Something she was almost ready to name. He has said something very much like that, Conrad said. Several times, and I have been starting to think that difficult, as my father defines it, might be exactly what I should have been looking for. She looked away. Toward the window, because she needed one moment of privacy from his very direct gaze, and from the feeling she had been pressing down since October, the feeling she had called impractical and dangerous, and exactly the kind of mistake her mother had made. She let it be what it was. She was in love with her husband. She had probably been in love with him since before October. She had been too busy surviving the consequences of that love to attend to the love itself, which was, she recognized, precisely the kind of thing her mother would have done, and she had promised herself she would not. She did not say it yet. She was not ready, and readiness mattered. There is still your father, she said to the window. He will not accept the recalculation quietly. There will be pressure from other directions, and things said about me in rooms I am not in, and you will need to hold your position not when it is easy but when it is not. I know that. Know it when he is in the room, she said. That is the part that matters. He reached across the table and covered her hand with his. Not a grand gesture, nothing theatrical, just his hand over hers, simple and entirely sincere. I know it, he said, in my body. She looked at their hands. She looked at his face. All right, she said. Not the careful, provisional all right of November. The full, final version. The all right of a woman who has looked at something difficult and chosen it anyway, on purpose, with both eyes open. The baby came in May, on a Wednesday afternoon, with more efficiency than Dr. Greer had anticipated for a first birth. Conrad paced the hallway with the focused agitation of a man who was very good at control and had none of it just now. Lottie managed everything with the authority of a woman who had attended a great many births and found the surrounding drama largely unnecessary. She came out after 2 hours, a girl, both well, then went back in before Conrad could ask any of the questions visible on his face. He sat beside the bed. He looked at the child. Small, dark-haired, already possessed of an opinion about her own existence that was remarkable in someone so recently arrived, and then at Estelle. She has your expression, he said. The one that means she has already made up her mind about something. She is 4 hours old, Estelle said. She has decided she is here, Conrad said. That seems sufficient for now. She looked at him then, at his face, open in the way it had been that January evening when she had finally told him the truth, without the careful management that was his natural register. Just the actual thing underneath, and she thought about the walk home from Dr. Greer's office in October, and the decision she had made on that walk, and how close she had come to holding that decision so tightly, she strangled the thing it was meant to protect. Conrad, she said. Yes. I love you. She held his gaze. I have loved you since before November, before October possibly. I didn't say it because I needed to know first that you were choosing me, not obligated to me, not staying because leaving was too complicated. Choosing, a pause. I needed to see the difference. He looked at her for a long moment. His eyes were doing the thing she had learned not to look away from, the full, unguarded thing. I have been choosing you, he said, since the morning I came to Ash Hill, and could not say yes when you asked me whether I wanted the marriage to be over, because it was not what I wanted. He covered her hand with his, the same simple gesture as always. It has never been what I wanted. The child made a small sound between them, not a cry, just an announcement of presence. Hello, Estelle said to her, we have been waiting for you. Roderick came to Ash Hill every Christmas after that. The first year cautiously, the second with more ease, and from the third onward with the settled manner of a man who has accepted that he was wrong about something important and decided to live well inside that acceptance without requiring anyone to continuously acknowledge it. He argued with Estelle about county politics. She was right more often than he was. After the second year he stopped being surprised by this. On his last Christmas visit, he sat by the window in the front room while the girl, 5 years old, reading already, arguing about everything with the focused certainty of someone who had been paying close attention since before she could speak, climbed onto the arm of his chair and demanded his opinion on a picture in her book. He gave his opinion. She gave hers, which was contrary, and supported with what appeared to be an actual argument. Roderick looked across the room at Conrad with the expression of a man who has encountered something he did not anticipate. She is going to be relentless, he said. Yes, Conrad agreed. Your father would have been delighted. He would have. He also would have told me I was a fool. He would have been right, Roderick said, and he drank his coffee and did not say anything else, which was, Estelle had come to understand, his version of an apology, not for the word, but for the time it had taken. The fire burned. The girl argued her case, and Estelle, watching from across the room, felt the particular warmth of a life that had not been arranged or fallen into or held together by the weight of what other people had decided, but chosen, deliberately, imperfectly, daily, by two people who had learned at some cost the difference between what they owed each other and what they wanted to give. Her father had taught her that a woman who knows what she has does not waste time mourning what she doesn't. What she had, it turned out, was this. It was enough. It had always been enough. She had simply needed to choose it, clearly, finally, with her eyes all the way open, to be able to see that.